Something we do at Nothing But Truth, because that's what we're about. Nothing but truth, bringing it to you. And it's a buffet. You can take it, you can leave it. Okay? You know where I'm coming from. I'm a far-right conservative guy. Now, some you say, well, I'm on the left. I'm moderate. I'm whatever you are. You want the truth, right? Okay. Well, look at the substance of what I put out and say yes or no. Am I telling the truth? I oftentimes get the emotional replies on Facebook or these false comparisons. It's like with Benghazi. They come out with the ARB, but they don't mention the context of the ARB. Why do I bring up Benghazi? Because we're not going to let it go. We're not going to let that go. We're not going to let the VA scandal go. We're going to be talking to Lieutenant Colonel Gordon Kakulu a little later on this week, either tomorrow or the next day. A follow-up. Here's a man, Green Beret, served his country throughout, always recognized the importance of the troops, and because he's one of them, and fought for the truth to be told by writing books like Inside Gitmo. So understand, this is not a passing fancy. This is something we're dedicated to, and you're going to get it. And that is inevitably, it's good news to have, because then you can base your opinion, your vote, whatever it may be, your vote, your business, on substance. Okay? And that's what we want. Speaking of substance, let's keep moving. And we have, yes, a story of Bob Schieffer. Bob Schieffer and the story about Tim Geithner and his book. Tim Geithner, former Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner. Tim Geithner was actually asked about something that he had written in his book, which he said, quote, the book is stress test, quote, I remember during one of the Roosevelt Room prep sessions before I appeared on Sunday shows, I objected to what Dan Pfeiffer wanted me to say. Social Security didn't contribute to the deficit. We talked about this last week. Back to the quote, it wasn't a main driver of our deficits, but it did contribute. And Pfeiffer said the line was a dog whistle to the left, a phrase I had never heard before. He had to explain that the phrase was code for to the Democratic base, signaling that we intended to protect Social Security. And so he's in essence being told and asked to not tell the truth about Social Security contributing to the deficit. And Bob Schieffer asked him about it. Roll it.
Did you at any time when you were Treasury Secretary, did the administration ever try to get you to put a more positive spin on things than you thought the situation deserved?
You know, I never had that experience. I had a amazingly good experience with this president and this White House, in the sense that my overwhelming experience was, this is a man very good at making decisions, unpopular decisions, after looking at all the evidence, who was willing at that time to put policy ahead of politics in a way that was very important for the country. Because again, it would have been easy for him to sort of sit back and say, I'm going to let it burn itself out. It's something I inherited. I'm not responsible for it. And that would have been devastating for the country. So my experience was he was excellent in crisis, good at making decisions, very tough on the rest of us, very tough on all of us to make sure to examine all the options. And I never felt I was in a position where they put a political constraint on what we were doing, and definitely never tried to make us more optimistic than we should have been.
But, and Schieffer just drops it, goes to another topic, doesn't follow up. Here's Brett Baier asking about the same topic last week. Roll it.
Let me just say clearly, I was never, ever in the position where anyone in the White House asked me to do that. And of course, I would never have done it. But Dan Pfeiffer never asked me to do that, I would never have done that. What Dan Pfeiffer was doing, which I think was helpful to me actually, was to point out that we didn't want to look like our proposals to help solve the long-term fiscal problem. Proposals that were going to appear to some as cutting Social Security benefits to cover the shortfalls, the deficits in other parts of the country, other parts of the government.
Okay, but I guess it reads a little differently, the way you write it, because you write, quote, I remember during one Roosevelt Room prep session before I appeared on Sunday shows, I objected when Dan Pfeiffer wanted me to say Social Security didn't contribute to the deficit. It wasn't the main driver of our future deficits, but it did contribute. Pfeiffer said the line was a dog whistle to the left, a phrase I had never heard before. He had to explain that it was a phrase that was code to the Democratic base, signaling we intended to protect Social Security. I mean, it wouldn't be a dog whistle if he was asking you to say it's just it's not a main drive.
And we didn't want these reforms we thought were very good for the country to be vulnerable to misperception on either side, that we were going to try to solve the deficit problem on the backs of Social Security.
But it does contribute.
To the long-term fiscal problem? Yeah, because as is obvious, it's just a math thing.
It's just a math thing. You see how he challenged him? You see how he said that contradicts? Schieffer just moved on. If you take all of this, if somebody makes a claim that they ask you to lie about the deficit, we explained the deficit of how much it added last week in covering this. We covered it 3 times. One with Chris Woodward, one with Jerry Baier, and the other on our own when we were talking about the deficit being added to. And the reason I cover this is to point out the press is not challenging the fact that this man, the Treasury Secretary, Timmy Geithner, is sitting there saying one thing, contradicting himself now when he's asked about it, about the president, the administration asking him to mislead the American people about the deficit. Tell me this. Tell me, this is troubling. This is big news. There is a pattern here. Incidentally, have I mentioned, Cedar, correct me if have I mentioned anybody's race yet? No, I haven't. Cedar tells me I haven't. You know why? I don't give a rip about somebody's race. Yet, in the next segment, I'm going to tell you why they need to talk about race. And I've talked about this before, but we have some new clips from Michelle Obama, our First Lady. And here's my point. They want to talk about everything but accountability. They want to talk about everything about what more they want to spend and how if we would just pass more legislation to spend more money, we'll somehow dig out of this. But they won't explain the failure. They won't address the fact that they were addressing the VA scandal in 2008 and were made aware. And now, when we have the IRS, Benghazi, they don't want to address it. It's the job of the Fourth Estate to hold people to account. Truly, it's your job. It's my job, because this is the kind of government we want. Your vote, your business, but we got to tell the truth. And if they are knowingly misleading the American people when it comes to deficits, and Bob Schieffer won't call them out, that's pathetic. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth, AFR Talk.